us just sitting around.
Does anyone have an objection to me starting it now? I mean, I know you guys probably want to get out of here later.
No, let's rock and roll.
All right. All right, so I would like to convene the meeting for the sewage disposal working group subcommittee regulations and legal. The first is just an opening remark, and I don't have any today. The second one would be the schedule the next meeting. We have a schedule, we have it already set for December 22nd as the whole group, I believe, meeting at 2 p.m. I know this is getting, well, we need to get this stuff written up pretty quick, but I was thinking January 7th because we do have that December 22nd meeting. And I think that we'll be talking about a few of the things that we go through today at that meeting. So January, just put that in the back of your minds, January 7th, same time. I'm trying to make it at the same time every week so that we can all kind of schedule for it. The other thing I wanted to mention, which I guess is part of this, is that the other two co-chairs and I met with somebody who's worked with the codes and standards and was at one time actually a chair. And he came to talk, or he talked to us about how the the procedure of the codes and standards committee. And so we wanted to listen to it first because we didn't want to just bring him in here, and we wanted to see if this was going to be worthwhile for our group because we're in such a time crunch. So he did agree to come December 22nd to talk to the full group. So I don't want to get into that. But in short, it was just kind of going through the way that the codes and standards are set up through the DAS, which obviously is a separate agency. But it's similar in certain areas to technical standards that I think might actually be helpful. And it also has kind of incorporated in there that appeals process that we were talking a little bit about. So I don't want to go too into the weeds about that, but we will be talking that on December 22nd. Next item on this is technical standards and code advisory. So I'm a health director, so we are a little busy right now in a sanitarian. And so unfortunately I had to use some, I want to say AI to gather some information on the regulation or technical standards in the process, but that is what I did. And I sent it out to the other committee members just to see if they could take a look at what other states do. And it is a hodgepodge. It really is. It's different from Washington to Idaho, and there's different ways of setting it up, which I think that's one of the reasons why I found what we were talking about with codes and standards interesting, because it's similar to that process. And again, different states, similar process. Just threw this out for you guys to take a look at them. I read a few of them and like, how are we going to change the regulations if we are, or technical standards if we are, and what should be put in there if needed. Okay. So that was just for you guys to all look at. The other part was the second one was legal process and final decision. And again, this may end up being incorporated into one thing as a recommendation or as part. I don't know how that's going to work out. I think that's a full group discussion versus just the subgroup discussion. And I think there was one in Virginia that was similar to what I was describing. And I think I set that out, but I really only found one. I didn't go too deep into it, but I feel like I only found one. But again, I think this codes and standards has an appeals process kind of stuck in there that would be helpful to us. And so it's been probably be a short meeting, guys, especially since we don't have as many as of our group on here as we usually do. But what I wanted to do next, well, first of all, let's open that up to discussion. Does anyone want to talk about technical standards, code advisory, what I sent out as discussion items, nothing set in stone, or legal process? Would anyone like to discuss that? Okay. Fun group today. I just had my holiday lunch though.
Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Okay. Just to chime in, I did read all those, and it is a hodgepodge. There's a lot going on there. I don't disagree entirely with how ours are kind of modeled already. It seems like everyone's kind of doing the same thing. So to completely dump what we have to pick up on what Iowa is doing doesn't make a lot of sense right now. So that's my 2 cents on having read all those and see all the different angles everybody's taking. But that's my 2 cents. I'm not sure that we need to dump completely what we have right now.
Go ahead, Dennis.
So I happen to work for a national wastewater company, and I deal with all state codes, provincial codes, And so a couple of my favorite lines are, I've long given up trying to memorize state codes because there's just too many of them, right? In many states, there's not a state code. So Michigan, California, a couple other states are county by county. And it's just, so my other favorite line is, geez, it's funny how I cross a political boundary and the laws of physics seem to change. So we just need to keep that in mind and get back to, what's practical, what's common sense. I think there's a lot of things we can recommend for the code to change. What comes to mind immediately, again, many states, many different things. Like we have our reserve area, right? Our 100% set aside. Some states is 100%, some states is 50%, some states don't even mention it. And what's the common practice nationally if your systems fail? You go to the old system, you dig it out, and you replace it right there in footprint, right in kind. So if the home builders are looking for a way to, I don't know, increase buildability and decrease costs, we could say, look, it'd be practical. I think we do need some reserve area. I'm an engineer. I like factors of safety. I like to be conservative, but maybe 50%, because hey, I have a 3-bedroom home, but I have 5 kids. I want to put on an extra bedroom. I want mom and dad to retire with me. So that gives, the future. I could expand my system if I needed to. That's fine. So, that's one good example. The other thing I think we can think of is, today's technology, right? Set back to property line, set back to home. We could easily kick that back to 5 feet, easily with GPS and all the tools we have out there and good surveys and, AutoCAD plan, you name it. There's no reason why we couldn't. So I think there's some easy wins there that we could all agree on. I'm not saying we need to adopt the Iowa code or anybody or anywhere else, because certainly there is some level of climatic differences that won't translate. But anyway, so those are just some ideas for me that thinking off the top of my head that would, I think, appease the home builders, but not. Again, number one goal is to protect public health, right? So I believe there are some things we could agree to that say, hey, look, we could waiver on, let's say, the reserve area, and we're not going to, have more dead bodies or, increase the chance of public health outbreaks.
Thank you, Dennis. And I will, my presentation towards the end may talk a little bit more towards the shoreline and sensitive areas. I think you'll appreciate Dennis being down here on the shoreline. And I agree on some of that, but especially with the sensitive areas, I'm a little more concerned. And again, I'll get into that. Rob, you had your hands up.
Yeah, I just regarding the issue of technical standards and the processes we engage in their review and change. I'm recalling from our discussion last time when Matt was in the group. I for one was kind of sensitive to what Matt was thinking about, what could be done to perhaps mitigate blowback, as I understand it, that his office would receive after making what he thought were consensus decisions amongst the committee members and representatives of the industry. And with that in mind, then I agree with Tom that I don't think we need to make any substantial changes necessarily, but perhaps administrative ones at the DPH level, which perhaps would do a job of mitigating some of that blowback after consensus decisions were made. And then if that's the case, that's something DPH could do outside the confines of any recommendation that we make.
Thank you, Rob. Tom?
Reserve
Tom,
areas. Am I on mute again? No, I'm on. Reserve areas. I'll die on this hill. I think reserve areas are necessary in new construction because I have time and again seen the area be completely demolished during construction, and we end up with. I have a lot in Plymouth where we ended up with nothing because they not only destroyed primarily destroyed the reserve. Engineering, yeah, we can always build something, we can make something, but it no longer becomes code compliant. And we don't have this is new construction, it needs to be code compliant. So I really don't think we should be messing with the reserve area once the system is permitted. Once it's actually got a permit to discharge, that reserve area technically goes away anyhow. So the point of finding that extra area during the initial development of the parcel, I think, is worthwhile. And I really don't see the need. It doesn't reduce anything by reducing the to 50% or any other number, because you still have square footage on the land taken up. You might as well use the 100% reserve area. That came up, so I just wanted to throw my comment out there on that.
Thank you, Tom. Rob?
Sure, reserve areas. Tom's absolutely right. Once a dwelling has a certificate of occupancy or is an existing dwelling, the reserve area issue goes away. It's a non-issue. That being said, like Tom, many times during new construction, for whatever reason, the existing primary gets destroyed during the course of constructing the new dwelling or new structure. And when I say destroy, technically what we're talking about is the naturally occurring arable soils above the maximum high restrictive layer is removed or damaged, and then therefore is immediately in non-compliance with our current technical standards, and therefore you can't legally install in the state of Connecticut subsurface sewage disposal system in that location once that naturally occurring arable soil has been destroyed. That means the only thing left over is some other place on the property, and that's why I think it's important to have a reserve area, because inevitably mistakes are going to be made, and if you don't have the reserve area when this does happen, then then you're looking at not being able to comply and technically legally, and then therefore the property can't be developed under Connecticut technical standards.
So you know what, Rob, that's what you said is very important, because that is a question that I had asked. I have no problem entertaining it as long as I find out from the state that what happens if a system, you say for ledge rock, for example, right? And we don't have a reserve area. Does that now mean that the lot is now not buildable? And if that is the case, what steps do we go through next? And that would be my concern with reserve areas just in general. But overall, making sure that we have these conversation continuities, which is why I keep on pressing back on the technical standards and the code and the codes and standards, because having this process open with your business, with developers, with sanitarians, basically what our code advisory committee is already kind of is important. And we're talking about some serious things here with the reserve area and with a bunch of other stuff. And as far as Dennis as ripping out a system and putting back in, totally understood. But I think that when we go through the shoreline stuff, 90% of our shorelines are already built up. So these tear down rebuilds are where we are going to have a lot of challenges. And I'll get into that. I'll let Tom go and then let anyone else go as well. And then I'll talk about the 100A and my difficult sites down here. Go ahead, Tom.
So just to bolster a little more what Rob and I are saying, as soon as you destroy, let's say, the primary, you didn't have another one, and engineering wise, you can build a system that will function. The very fact that it is no longer code compliant means it is bucking the public health, because if we decide that the system, these soils are what we need to maintain public health, and you eliminate them and we create an engineered solution, we automatically are saying this doesn't necessarily protect the public health as well as the naturally occurring soils. So that's why I feel that, again, public health, I think, is primary here, and that's our defense with this reserve area. Secondly, just to once again beat this to death, is the B100A. Let's say you come in for your 5-bedroom house, you have a 4-bedroom, you only have to show that you have a code complying area to place that system. And that would be, if required, to put the additional bedroom onto the existing system, but the existing system becomes its own reserve area. So we're not losing anything under B100A by eliminating the reserve areas. And most of the time, I think, as we're going to get into this discussion, is that when the people that are looking for this affordable housing angle and all these other things is not as much new construction as grabbing something that exists now and creating a different use or a different flow rate. And by doing that, you need to show that code complying area, but we're not asking for a reserve area necessarily. So I think the distinction has to be made with these developers, what the reserve area is, and when it becomes moot and B100A, and when it's critical that we have a code complying, i.e. public health protectant system.
Good. Thank you, Tom. Peter, you have your hand up, and then Miriam after.
Just a quick question. Did the meeting at all end? Like
I'm
this
sorry,
meeting?
what?
Did this meeting at all like end at all?
You left. I saw something that said that you left and then you came back, but that's all
Yeah,
I
I was
saw.
yeah, my computer restarted. So I apologize if you guys were having any technical difficulties, but okay. It's
No,
all
we're
good.
doing great.
All right,
I thought you
all
were going to talk about sewage. Thank you, Peter.
Not an expert. You guys are. All right. Good luck, guys.
Thanks, Peter. Miriam, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I lowered my hand. I didn't unmute. Dante and I have been kind of going back and forth in the background a little bit to say that like a lot of what we're discussing here is very consistent with what's in the regs. So that's reassuring for us to hear, you know, from the engineers, from local health and whatnot, that this is really, you know, it seems like the regulations are really the direction, the current regulations are kind of the direction that, you know, the scientists really want to be moving in. The challenge we have right now, though, is the home builders. So everything around naturally occurring soils, the reserve areas, that's where we're getting a lot of pushback from the home builders. So I think, you know, if this group is in agreement that this is the right direction, I think, you know, there has to be some sort of strategy about how we communicate that to the larger group, how we get them on board, because you know, ultimately that stakeholder group is not represented at this meeting, it doesn't seem. And there's no kind of like it's almost like an echo chamber here. And we need to be careful that like we don't get bogged down when we bring this back to the larger group. So I just want to flag that as kind of like a next step here.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right with that with the developers. I think that the December 22nd meeting will be with everyone. And yes, they are probably going to have a different opinion of that. Go ahead, Tom. You're on mute, Tom. And Audrey, you're next.
Yes, I agree that the home builders may or may not be represented here, but the very way that we're going to get this across is by our presentation of our whatever this letter is. So by the time they read that, which I hope they have ample opportunity to do so, that's where the discussions will take place. So I think that is going to be self-solving because that's our purpose here, is to present something to the whole group. So hopefully this group is in agreement that we preserve these angles, unpopular as they may be with the builders, but I really think these are popular things with the public health community.
I just want to say, you know, there is, again, I always keep on saying this difference between just regular, you know, health, and then you got the areas that are a lot more sensitive. And this is, again, where I'm going to go with B100A and difficult sites over here with large increases. And I'll go into that. But I personally think there should be two areas that we talk about when we talk about reserve area. Audra, you hear me all the time, sorry.
Thanks. So I agree. I think the reserve areas are important. And I will add, because I'm sitting on two subcommittees. As the Nitrogen and Environment Committee continue to discuss, you know, what are ways that we can meet the goals of legislation here. One of the suggestions that DEEP did put forward was, you know, a potential of reducing that area if somebody put in advanced treatment. So if we know the effluent coming out is going to meet, you know, AT standard, whatever that is, right? Then potentially there's less of an environmental risk. So you could potentially reduce, but I understand, I wholeheartedly understand, because I see construction and stormwater all the time, is those areas get demolished, right? And so I think that is important. So I just want to put it out there for transparency. It is something that DEEP put forward, but there are conditions with that you would have to put in that advanced treatment.
And I just want to add that advanced treatment is big on the shoreline. I know a lot of people doing tear down, build on rebuilds would actually put AT in. And yeah, maybe it should be reduced if you're putting a system that's with advanced technology that can reduce nitrogen, phosphorus, etc. Tom, go ahead. Thank you, Audra.
Yep.
Very I like everything you just said, except for the fact that advanced treatment isn't here yet. So if we're going to start accommodating for advanced treatment, propose it, please, because, you know, I'm not against advanced treatment. I've been talking about it for 30 years since I've been going out to Rhode Island and seeing how effective it can be. But it's not here, and it's not in these regulations, and it's not in the technical standards. So until it's proposed, maintain what we got. And if you can show me that AT will help reduce those reserve areas, I'm on board, because that's science, and I'm all for science.
Where I go back with the codes and standards committee, you know, if we do get AT again, and you're right, and this has been a struggle for a couple decades now, I think. So, you know, having a board like something that's set up a little differently, but more formal as we go through AT, because we are going to get it right at DPH supposedly at some point. And these things are not a conventional septic system. And you know that. And if you go on to the Suffolk County, Barnstable, there's a lot into these AT systems, and I don't want to go off on a tangent on them, but on the shoreline, we absolutely need them. So I keep on pushing it for it, because whatever structure that we tried to recommend, it would be great if it did include down the road at some point. AT. Dante? Sorry. And
Yeah,
then
just to chime in on that, I mean, we have statutory scope to stand up an AT program, but we would need to have an actual program, right? So that goes back to funding and resources. We don't have in-house expertise. Like, will it come to us? I can't answer that, right? We don't know. Maybe. And when that does, we will do all kinds of consensus building and research and work on developing, you know, both regs and tech standards, right? Like it would fit into, you know, is there going to be a scenario where somebody would be required to have an AT system in a given situation? And then, of course, tech standards to govern like how those systems have to function and how they get approved and all that kind of stuff. We're far from that. So I don't, you know, it's like I from the perspective of DPH, I can't really comment, but I think it's all helpful to have this articulated as we consider these competing interests between public health, environment, and the use of the land and development. So
thank you, Dante.
Not there yet.
Go ahead, Audra. Audra, you might be on mute. Oh, there you go.
Yep, my mouse is too far from my other screen. Sorry. So you know, and I think that is important, and so we agree at Deep. One of the things I think I heard, and I've heard it twice now, is you guys mentioned new land and tear down, and I think one of the important factors when we go talk with the bigger groups is there is a huge difference between building on new land and build and redevelopment. Right. And so one of the proposals, again, Deep put forward was we need a set of standards potentially for, say, the coast and upland. Okay, if that doesn't work, then different sets of standards for potentially new land and tear down. They really do present different challenges, right? One is clearly more of an engineered solution, whereas the other is nature-based. And so it's one of the things, actually, if you, as you guys say it, it's something I want to take back to the other committee, because I think a lot of times in the nitrogen committee, we're talking about new land and not necessarily the tear down aspect. So I appreciate you guys bringing that up. But I think that'll be important for the bigger subgroup.
Thank you, Audra. I got a whole thing on that coming up.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Tom.
I'll do this later, but just to reinforce what Audra just said, it's my opinion that AT is never going to be used for, should never be used for new construction in the first place. If the site can't handle the sewage, you shouldn't be engineering it to do so. It should be able to handle the sewage. So the AT really is to do B100As, or, you know, tear downs fit into B100As. So that's why I think that we should, the AT thing is coming. Let's drop it for today, because you know, we're spinning our wheels on that one. So that's just my 2 cents.
Does anyone have anything else to say? Because you know, I believe Rob Miller said in one of our first meetings, so why do I get a little nutty about the shoreline and the environmental health aspect of shellfish beds and all that? If we're okay with going to the next topic, I was just going to show something that I deal with, because I deal with a lot of difficult sites. I've worked in many of the shoreline towns under orders, and it is hard. It is very hard down here, and it's very different. And a lot of our areas are already built up. So when you have a town that's about from the 17th century and you have buildings that are pretty much not the same building, but in the same location, you got a lot of grandfathering in. And a lot of these towns that are under orders have serious, I would say serious issues in the center of town, but issues in the center of town that make economic development, adding, you know, apartments and that kind of stuff very difficult. So when I hear about this going on, you know, a simple conversion from a retail store to an apartment, or an apartment upstairs and a retail downstairs, and want to move to a house, that's all going to have a sewage component to it. And sometimes, unfortunately, it can't be done. So, and sometimes it can. So there's a lot to it, but I figured if I could share my screen, Peter, I was just going to go through a presentation. Now, Tom, you've seen most of it already before. It is one that I've shown to the sanitarians because it is very true. All of Connecticut's not the same. And just even having two standards, one that's for more sensitive areas, for alleviating a public health issue, environmental protection issue, versus just there's not even wetlands or anything on the property, that's going to be a problem. So, Peter, can I share my screen?
Yep. Yeah, you should have the ability to.
Oh, I do. I do. Thank you, Peter. Okay. Do you guys see it? Oh. Do you guys see it now? Yeah. Okay. And you can hear me?
Sonia, which item is this on the agenda? Are we on to 4 now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Did you guys want to talk any more about B100 or technical standards and legal process? Because we are going to have on December 22nd a more robust conversation with all the members.
No, that's fine. No, just trying to keep track.
Are we good? Okay. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a day in the life in the shoreline town, which we have a lot of sensitive areas, not just on the shoreline, but also we have a lot of lakes and inland wetlands and tidal wetlands. So I just want to go through a couple different examples and explain why WPCAs on the shoreline and some of the health departments get a little concerned about overall changes of regulations that could impact us in a different way as they could impact the rest of the state. So I'm going to go through 3 different items. One of them is proposed new buildings with limited natural soils, another one's with repair, and another one's B100A, as well as showing some pictures of what happens after a strong storm like Irene and Sandy. This is Westbrook. Yes, they're septic. The whole entire town's septic. I worked in Westbrook, love the town, but a lot of the information I have is either from Westbrook or from Guilford because of the last 2 towns one town working in, and one town I left about 5 years ago. I want to show this picture. This is an undeveloped lot on the shoreline.
Sonia,
Yes?
I'm just seeing one slide that says difficult sites.
You're not seeing the rest?
No, we just see the first slide, Sonia.
Can you hit, yeah, from beginning? There you go. Maybe that'll
If
be.
you're in presenter mode, I think we're looking at the different screen.
Okay, presenter mode. How do I get out of there?
So, do you have 2 screens or 1?
2.
Okay. In the bottom, it's my right-hand corner. There's a picture. It's next to the zoom in, zoom out bar. You see that
Yes.
first icon? Click that.
Did I get you guys?
That's going to put you in slideshow. And
Okay.
then you have to share that screen because right now you're sharing the other screen.
Oh, okay. And I have to share this screen now.
Yeah.
Okay. That? Do you guys get it?
So now we see your presenter mode with notes. So unless you have weird notes at the bottom, where you're like, don't forget to tell them,
No. I'm sorry about the notes, guys. Just go from there. So as long as you can read this, which side are you seeing? Are you seeing difficult sites? Or are you seeing a picture?
Picture.
So we see the actual presenter side of the slideshow, which is like the main slide. And then if you have notes underneath. So, I mean, we can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. Can you see a new, sorry about that. I must have did something there. Can you see the screen with just a picture of a land with a Pioneer sign on it?
Yes. Pioneer Road.
Perfect. We're good. Okay. So this is an undeveloped lot on the shoreline where you would need 100%. Thank you, by the way, Audra.
Yeah.
100% system, 100% reserve area, and you have to deal with some stormwater. So this lot was probably about 50 to 100 feet wide and about 100 feet long. Very small lot. They really wanted to build on it. 13 deep test pits on that little piece of property. 3 soil scientists and on-site permeability. There was some hurricane displaced sand, some stormwater concerns, just a lot going on there. This is where you would see there's obviously an old stream that went through here on the left-hand side of the picture. On the right-hand side is just where the area is in Westbrook, right across from the water, okay? The new build did not have 18 inches of naturally occurring soil to the site. This whole project took 5 years, and a small town like Westbrook had to pay for some lawyers to help us through this health director's final decision because it was deemed not buildable under the public health code. It would require a fill. If we had the DPH held my hand, held Westbrook's hand through the whole entire process, they were wonderful. But it is a little concerning because it took so long to figure something out that should have been pretty easy to figure out, because it does need to have 18 inches of naturally occurring native to the site soils. But people do have deep pockets and they can challenge a decision. DPH cited several times based on facts. And that's how I just want to bring it up, because those are the type of legal concerns that we can get stuck into. That's way different than a complex repair. So when you have a system, a 2-bedroom system, say it could have been from the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever, you're allowed to have that back, even if you're on a property that looks like this. Okay, so they have to repair their system. And this is how complex the septic system repair can get on the shoreline. In the front is Long Island Sound of that building. In the back area is literally tidal wetlands. Okay, this is the area, just in a normal day, they have 2 properties, one on each side. Please note that when there's a big storm surge, that is the road again. You have a lot of sand there. Everything was pushed into that road. This is a design. The design has the building on one area, which is oceanfront, Long Island Sound, had to go through a town road, go through a town meeting and a town boat to go to the other side that he owned because they weren't together, and design a system that's almost directly, like very, very close to wetlands. That unfortunately, these are the things that we have to deal with, and they are very difficult to review. So training, I'm going to go back on that. Groundwater, radial flow, that kind of stuff isn't usually taught because it doesn't happen to a lot of Connecticut. This is things like that can happen in lake properties that are, in other areas of Connecticut, but this does primarily happen on Long Island Sound. Like I said, it was repair. We had to do what we had to do, and we had to give variances all over the places. But one of my biggest concerns with these types of situations, we repaired it, but how is frequent flooding going to affect that system? Well, we repaired it as best we could, had engineering done on it, and that's the best we can get. This is where I have my most concerns, B100A. When you have a property that's had historical use, again, they've had maybe it was a commercial restaurant downstairs and something above, or retail downstairs per se. Those flows are grandfathered in to a certain extent. So you can have what you had before. But when you look at a property like this, everything in a sanitarian's mind is screaming, engineer, don't do it. But there's only so much we can do. This is allowed. It's a grandfathered system. Would anyone think about putting a system right into something like this? No. There's a pond right there. It's very scary. Now, this is what it looks like now. It looks pretty, but again, you saw what it was before. So I'm saying sometimes it's not as protective of the environment as we would like when it comes to technical standards. So this is why I get a little tense, because in our world, putting down high strength waste in large quantities in an area that could be flooded out, or if the sea level rise does actually impact the level of the groundwater, then this isn't a good idea. And these are the things that we worry about down here on the shoreline. These slides are from Irene and Sandy, and I have to bring them up because when this happened, this is not an easy fix. This isn't just a couple sewer lines, not that that's an easy fix, being repaired. These are people's homes. They live in them. So obviously not this time, they have to figure out how to repair their system. And a lot of the times the funding that may or may not be available to them takes a long time to get. But we in public health, this is something we have to figure out right now. There's sewage on the ground. It's after a storm. There's a lot of confusion on the shoreline, but this is this type of stuff that was uncovered, again, during Irene and Sandy. Does it happen all the time? Well, we can't say for sure if it's not going to happen more or less, but, again, twice in 2 years, could you imagine if you were the homeowners here? So I went through all that, and I want to have a conversation discussion about it, but I put these 2 slides together because it goes back to what we're going to have to talk with the Nitrogen Environment Committee on disposal of sewage in areas of special concern and what they need and why they're there, right? Maybe this could be where we actually take a look at where we want to put something more stringent in for only areas that are sensitive, okay? And the last thing I wanted to bring up, and I kind of wish Matt was on this call, and I plan on sending an email or calling him directly after this. So these are the things for it to, what I have highlighted, please read that. When we have an area that's on the shoreline that's in sand and that we're under orders already about nitrogen loading in the sound, when you get to the point of of the surrounding natural soils being able to absorb or disperse the expected volume of sewage effluent without overflow, breakout, or detrimental effects on ground or surface water, if in their opinion may such occur. Okay, we're done with that. That is where I feel that we are going to struggle. You know, on the shoreline, the WPCAs can make their ordinances more stringent in the health code, but at the same time, you have one sanitary health director one health director requiring you to do a hydraulic analysis or different stuff. That's not exactly going to be helpful for our developers and be a consistent approach. Again, I'm talking about the shoreline guys.
Sorry,
So-
Sonia, you're still sharing your screen. We just see your screensaver, sorry.
Oh, no, I don't even, okay. Obviously I don't do this a lot. Still? Okay. Can I
Yeah, you
not
have
share?
to click stop sharing.
Okay, stop sharing. Did that work?
Nope, now we see your email.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, guys. Sorry. There we go.
The center button where you clicked share,
Mm-hmm. What?
just re-click that.
I just did. Did it work? You guys can talk while I'm trying to figure this out.
It's
I'm
okay,
so
don't
sorry.
worry about it.
Yeah. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Yeah, I'm not getting it.
We can't see your email.
You can?
Oh, there you
Oh, all
go.
good. You're perfect now.
There
You
you
fixed
go.
it.
I hit a bunch of buttons and it finally worked. Thank you.
Thanks, village.
I'm not shy about that. I'm very, 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 very bad with computers. And now you've all seen that as well as everyone else. Okay. So we want to open that up for discussion. And Rob, do you want to understand why I'm a little crazy on the shoreline about how things can impact us a little differently down here?
Sure, absolutely, I do, and I really do appreciate that presentation. It definitely illuminates some of the challenges that you guys are dealing with down there along the shore, which is certainly helpful for me as one person working predominantly in uplands to see. A couple of thoughts regarding the change of use piece, and a couple of slides too slow there. I think we're kind of stuck. You know, you can't, grandfathered flows are grandfathered flows. Private property owners have a right to use their property if it's grandfathered. Anything else beyond that would be considered a taking, probably, of private property use, which you definitely don't want to get into. But the other thing regarding sensitive areas and some of the systems, which are highly engineered and right on the coast, and super varianced up the wazoo to make it work. I can totally see and understand the concerns with those circumstances. And I'm open to any thoughts and tactics that we could consider to do a better job of protecting those sensitive areas. Given the size and given the density that you were demonstrating there, I am at a loss as to how you could, and without doing a taking, how even a repair could come even close to, adequately protecting the groundwater and surface waters in that area. I don't see how any nitrogen analysis or nitrogen assessment or hydraulic analysis would come even close to complying or demonstrating some kind of level of protection in that area. So I'm open to hear other people's suggestions on how to mitigate some of those concerns and issues that we just saw there. I can see why now some of those communities are under orders from DEEP, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I do want to preface this is because this is usually what somebody tells me or asks me as soon as I go into a different town is why don't we just sewer the area? I have to just remind people, we are raised the buildings a certain elevation. There's flood, we did all the flood maps, and guess what? Those systems are still under the ground. So, I just when someone says let's sewer the whole shoreline, that's not practical. And it was also been quite a huge fight in all of these towns from pretty much Guilford to Old Saybrook about not putting a sewer in. So I just don't want us getting stuck in that conversation again. But Yes, it is very difficult, Rob. And this, again, these are the reasons why I was pushing back so hard. There should be two definitions, in my opinion. I would love to bring this up. Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Tom? Thank you.
I'm just spitballing here.
You
not
you have a
having-
thought in your head.
Just spitballing here, not having any thoughts, not having any experience with this directly, but I presume, you issue permits to discharge for each of those repairs and that you limit the volumes that can be discharged into those systems. I don't know if that's one area to explore, both the volume and the nature of those discharge to better protect public health as
We're talking about variances.
one mechanism, one mechanism perhaps to better protect the environment down there. Just a thought.
Thank you, Rob. Yep. And we do have variances, and sometimes our permits discharge are like paragraphs long. So I do want to mention, though, one thing about the modifying the permit to discharge. I know that we got into NCR MLSS because at one point we were putting 0 on permits to discharge if they didn't have natural soils. I don't know if you or Tom remember this. So even if we modify the percentage, it's still going to be allowed to have that 2 or 3 bedrooms. But good point, Rob. Really good point. Thank you. Go ahead, Tom.
There's always holding tanks. But let's those float too, by the way. I hesitate, this is food for thought. I hesitate to create a whole nother category of sensitive areas when we already have areas of special concern that can be bolstered. So I think adding verbiage to the existing special concerns to include tidally influenced soils, or however you want to do it down there. The new areas of special concern definition that was presented to us does include a couple more good verbiage things that really bind it up. I don't remember it saying tidal, but I know it says tidal wetlands. But you're not worried about tidal wetlands as much as tidally influenced areas. And if we start looking at, and you guys got me here for soils, and Rob can hopefully chime in on this as well. When you're looking at these soils with these super high permeabilities, and that's going to be your titles. The alluvials are already covered by the current wetland statute, which are often also very permeable, but those run the gamut of being very poorly drained to excessively well drained. So alluvial soils, I think we got a good grasp on. But if we're going to include areas of special concern, highly permeable soils, and that definition could be built up somehow, or we could just call it that for now and see where we go. But there are highly permeable soils already defined elsewhere. And if you look at like Darcy's Law application and all this stuff, and you start looking at really how fast is this soil moving water, that's our nitrogen issue. And we aren't the nitrogen group. Okay, that's all right. But it's going to come into play. And if we start working on those highly permeable soils, and I think you're going to encompass most of your shoreline problem areas, because if it's not a tidal wetland, it's probably highly permeable. And you're going to end up with all of them being areas of special concern. Once you throw that moniker on it, you end up with all kinds of regulation that you could apply to it to either limit the B100A use. We're not going to go to a huge water use system when you've already got a small water use system. You're not taking anything. That property was already permitted for this flow, just as Rob said. So if we're not risking anything except that they can't grab a bunch of cash for it. Well, that's not our problem. Our problem is public health, and public health comes down to how well do the soils renovate sewage, and that's permeability all day long.
Yep. And one thing I wanted to add, though, Tom, with the soils is the permeability of the sand. So when you're doing a test pit on the sand, it's very difficult. So you saw the way that the sand got pushed in there. When we talk about natural soils native to the site, one of the biggest things, we need 60 inches, right, for MLSS not be there. So
yeah, but permeability doesn't have to be a test pit and this archaic perk test that we do. There are actual methodologies for testing permeability, and it could be in situ, it could be right on site, or it could be laboratory based. So to say, well, I dug this test hole 6 feet deep and I know it was caving in fast, but we didn't see any water. it's
Yeah.
going to give you a pretty good indication of what the permeability is, because that stuff is sloughing in there and it's going to be a highly permeable soil. But you can calculate permeability. You don't have to stare at it and take a guess. So you're determining with your test pit other things certainly besides the permeability. You're looking at a restrictive layer, you're looking at groundwater, you're looking at ledge. Those are the things that you can define in a test pit very readily. You can get some soil texture, and structure from the soil, but in a highly permeable soil, it's going to be loose, it's going to be sand. So you've already got that definition. But if you're going to be doing a permeability and really prove to somebody that that site cannot handle further development, you need to show that those soils cannot handle the nitrogen, and therefore the permeability is your key, in my opinion. What do you
And
think, Rob?
Question though for you guys too, before we Rob, you answer that. So when we
I
talk
concur.
about areas, okay, I concur. Areas of special concern. One of the things that we talk about is just needing an engineer plan, and for new construction. Right? Am I wrong? I'd have to look at you guys to say.
But,
Is that
but
the only thing?
you're getting one with your area of special concern. It says right in it. As soon as you're an area of special concern, an engineer must design this. And an engineer can't design it without the proper information. We're going to require the proper information, which is a permeability test.
But the area of special concern is defined as new construction. Like my whole thing was, can we put that area of special concern into B100A? Because for us down here, it's tear down, rebuild, tear down, rebuild. And those are the areas that are the most sensitive, being on the shoreline and on top of sometimes side of wetlands.
I don't see why that's limited to new construction.
That's why I was reading the technical standards. I don't know, like, if anyone else knows.
Anyone who wants to chime in on that, I don't believe that's true.
Yeah, I think I'd have to read it again, but I thought if you're an area of special concern, doesn't matter whether it's a repair or not. I guess I'd have to look at the regulations again.
Dante, do you know, perhaps? Not to put you on the spot like that.
I'm looking. I'm not Matt, but I will either figure it out or get back to you, because it's a good question.
Yeah.
Well,
And that would be great for us.
I mean, our
because that would solve
practice.
everything.
Yeah, our practice has always been an engineer, whether it's
B100A or new.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, it doesn't matter. I mean, 'cause that's practice. So I guess we've never bothered to look at the regulation, because we have the authority to require it regardless.
You do, yeah.
Right.
And we do the same down here. People push back all the time. You want an engineer plan for a B100A? I'm not putting a system in. Well, yeah, under our area, we do need that in some cases. Go ahead, Audra.
So again, this is all good discussion. One of the other touch points with the other group was defining nitrogen sensitive area. And I think this might get back to something that, and I might not be saying this right, but in the regs, the area of concern or environmental interest or whatever we're defining those things are. I think there was a desire by some of the other committee members to define what a nitrogen sensitive area is, to require the additional nitrogen study. And as we're talking about, environmentally sensitive areas, like deep would add to that something like, if you've got ledge or high water table, or it's not just nitrogen based, right? It really is those roadblocks that are just, they're in the geology. They're there, right? You really just have to really think about it. I'll add to that. It's the same thing I mentioned to the group this morning was DEEP is about to propose nutrient standards for lakes and estuaries here in the States. Long time coming. There's been narrative, there's been some numerics, and so we're really taking a hard look. So it's another thing just to think about in terms of if a lake has a standard to it, new construction, redevelopment, you start taking all these big things and you stick them in the puzzle, that's really kind of define where building can occur, right? For everybody. So if we're looking at redefining or opening up sensitive area, I would just throw those 2 cents in there, that we want to make sure it captures what do we consider to be sensitive.
I love it, Audra, and that's definitely why we're meeting with nitrogen and environment. Yes, I think these, because I was at the meeting, not this one, the other one before that, and I think it's vital for this group to meet with that group about this particular section. Go ahead, Tom, and then Dante.
So to answer that, and in my further attempts to keep this as simple as possible, every area of special concern is nitrogen sensitive. It's either shallow to bedrock, it's close to wetlands, it's poorly drained, or it's highly permeable already by definition, because you got perk rates faster than 1 per inch. So you've already got this sensitive, everyone goes to this sensitive area, and I don't have a problem with the verbiage, but we've already got a whole section. If you want to define or throw a sentence into area of special concern, including nitrogen sensitive areas, you're still going to need to define that. And I think if you look at what nitrogen sensitive areas are, they are areas of special concern. Every single example? No, but I think it incorporates those conditions already in our areas of special concern. But again, it could use a little tweaking, but that's why are we reinventing the wheel here? I think it's already built in.
No, I think you're spot on. And so I think one of the challenges that came up with, is really not being so prescriptive. Nitrogen is the underlying factor, right? But there are so many things that go into that already to get to that anyway. So somebody had mentioned, is there a map that could be available? Are there resources that could exist where we could define those just based on information the state has already? The governor's office, or there's a GIS office who keeps tabs on maps. That's what they're for. If we have USGS maps and soil maps, and, could we start kind of doing a GIS project, so to speak, to help with development, right? So these areas, you're going to have extra challenges, right? So with solar, and I'm just trying to draw a parallel to something else that Deep was involved with, was they worked with UConn and some other folks to develop what they call the CREST map. And essentially, it's a tool for developers to help figure out where are good areas to start looking at for building, and where are areas that likely are not going to pass muster for one reason or another, like endangered species or groundwater or slopes or whatever else. And so, thinking about putting our environment hat on and then trying to provide tools to the builders, that would take some effort. I don't want to make it sound like that's not, an overnight tool or a task, but it could be something that comes out of that to help them figure out what those areas are. And that can help the local health departments as well to be like, this area is already defined. You can't, you're already going to have to do extra things, or you can't build here, right? Or you just have to jump through extra analysis to get there, right?
I agree. Thanks. Thank you, Audra. That would help us, by the way, a lot. Go ahead, Dante.
Yeah, so I think just in response to Audra's point about, there are broader environmental concerns. I think, Tom, your answer to that helped us, but we would have to frame it as a public health issue, right? To be defensible in a DPH regulation, we would need to, build it on public health evidence rather than just environmental concerns. So I think that's just something to keep in mind if we make recommendations, or if this group makes recommendations related to the scope of the environmentally or nitrogen sensitive areas, whatever the term might be, just to keep that in mind, because that's sort of our, our purpose as an agency. We have to stay in our lane.
Can I just, so there is that section about what would be detrimental to groundwater and surface water. I always kind of go back to that, because that is kind of what we're talking about. And
yes, and the drinking water. Yeah, and yes.
And that's where I would
Absolutely.
go.
Just have to connect the dots, right?
Yep, exactly. Thank you, Dante.
Yep.
Go ahead, Tom.
The nitrogen is well documented as not only an environmental impact, but as a public health issue. So I don't think there's anyone that's going to argue that increasing nitrogen load in the groundwater is a good thing. So I definitely want to keep all this on the public health end, because we have an Department of Environmental Protection. Let them protect the environment. We need to protect the public health. So I think everything I think I've said is applicable to public health, not just, saving frogs and trees. That's my opinion. I like frogs and trees. I'm just saying it's not our job.
I like frogs and trees too, Tom. But again, in our area, we're under orders. So I think we do have an extra layer that we're dealing with the nitrogen on top of it being detrimental to public health. And the one thing I didn't show you guys is take all those sites that I saw, put some private wells on there. And that's what a lot of you guys are dealing with lakes, right? So it's not just the shoreline. It's phosphorus into our lakes. It's waterfront properties pretty much.
Right, which all gets back to permeability. If your permeability is high around any one of those structures, and now lakes, we tend to have, actually a lot of the lakes will have, some poorly drained soils as well. But if you're looking at those highly permeable soils, then you're going to need to do these extra steps, and it's an area of special concern.
Agree with that. Rob?
So,
Oh, sorry. Oh,
go ahead,
Uh,
Rob, sorry.
Okay, no worries. So just again, to Dante's point, connecting the dots and maybe being appropriately prepared to defend this. I can recall some of the literature that Audra sent out regarding nitrogen as more than just a concern for blue baby syndrome. But that was linked to groundwater quality and its effect on drinking water, some of those ill health effects. And so looking at Sonia's presentation, it appears to me that, I'm assuming that those neighborhoods were served by public water systems. Not all those houses had individual private wells, right, Sonia? Okay, maybe
no,
there
no,
are.
we have lots of wells on the shoreline, so we also have to deal with saltwater intrusion, water treatment systems because
I'm
of
just kind of I'm wondering out loud. So if we're dealing with a neighborhood that is served by a public water system, then all I'm suggesting is that there may be a bit of a weakness in the public health link there. We might have to think of another way to go to defend the position as it pertains to nitrogen.
Thank you. Miriam, did you want to say something?
I think my comment's a little off topic, so I'm going to hold off for a bit and then come back to it.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Okay, so yeah, well, that's what I was going to talk to you guys about and explain why some of the WPCAs on the shoreline were concerned about these regulations. It wasn't so much as the other areas in town, because frankly, we have areas that probably could be built on very well in large swaths of them. It's just, again, with us on the shoreline, a lot of these areas is tear down, rebuild. That water question, Rob, oh my gosh, we have an area, we just extend the water line to some areas, but some areas turned it down. So these can be very difficult on the shoreline. And when I always talk about the permeability is one thing, Tom, but we're talking about increasing the gallons per day, the flow. And if you have beautiful sandy soils and you can't find a restrictive layer, then increasing the gallons per day may not be the best idea because of the permeability, but can we make that set somewhere so that they can't take down a 4-bedroom house and put in a 10,000 gallons per day restaurant? I mean, that's extreme, but do you see what I'm saying, Tom?
But that comes into, and I've been looking at the regulations here on my other screen. I'm so fancy. And B100A clearly says a co-complying area is everything in B103. So there's no problem saying if it's a area of special concern that occurs in B103, therefore it is in B100A. To your point, yes, we did a perk test. We did a test hole in this. We have beautiful sand, and up here in the Northwest Hills, if I hit that gold mine, we're not going to have a lot of concerns, especially if there's nothing downslope like the Housatonic River or a lake. But so now we're making a judgment call at that point, saying the permeability isn't going to be a big factor because we have all this length of run before we get off the property, for example. What you're describing is if you're pure application of the code, you're looking at sandy soils. I have a great perk test, whatever that means. And therefore I can put a 12-bedroom house on this 1/4 acre, but you can't if you show the permeabilities don't support nitrogen renovation. So, or sewage renovation for that matter, because permeability also plays into how well it's going to disinfect, let's say, the sewage. So if your highly permeable soils are racing that sewage down to the groundwater level, even if it's at 12 feet, you're not serving public health. So that permeability has got to come into play. And that's why we always use that one faster than 1 minute per inch, but that probably could be bumped to 5 or 10. If 1 to 10 is an area of special concern automatically, then we're going to have to do a nitrogen study, and you're going to have to prove that lot will support those 12 bedrooms. So it's all public health. That's science and public health mixed. It's not anything else, in my opinion.
That's awesome. That's exactly what I want to do. Now, can we put that in the technical standards so that it's cookie cutter for all the rest of the people who are dealing with this situation? It's not just Guilford. So remember, we're talking about perspective where this is it. This is the way we do it. We're not so much into the nitty-gritty like we're doing right now. So my whole push is, okay, if we do that, that's great. Can we show us how we do that? And can we put in the technical standards to make sure it's consistent? So if a developer comes in here, I'm not giving them at the 9th hour, oh, by the way, I need an insight permeability sample, and you need to do all X, Y, Z. It would be better for a developer coming in knowing exactly what they need to do. I mean, they kind of already know there's gonna be issues on the shoreline anyway when they're building up on like these soils. But however, that's the way you just said it. Can we put that somehow in the technical standards as one of the areas of concern as this being a thing? Because again, B100A, that is my bigger concern more than new development. You're not going to get that much new development down here. And by the way, one of the first things that a big project is going to do is go through these commissions, right? Well, when you have something like we've been just talking about, Tom and I, we just kind of laid out there. Well, no, yeah, we kind of leave ourselves exposed because it isn't protective of public health, right? So those little things like detrimental to the groundwater, that's what a commission is going to grab onto. And being stuck in the middle all the time, I don't want to be stuck in the middle. So if there's a way to protect it in a way that is across the board and being able to have our sanitarians trained to do that, I just think would be extremely helpful.
It's a whole another issue, and it's not on the agenda today. But
yeah, I do
we'll
want to
get to
add that
that.
anything on the the technical standards go through the code advisory committee. So again, I know that that's something that other groups are looking at, but that I think is certainly something that would want to be brought up there. But I don't think you would legislate or regulate that, but definitely something to be included there.
Well, it shows up in multiple locations. So you can regulate this through the technical standards, which isn't a problem. And it's never the 9th hour, Sonia, because when the law passes, that's day one. And they're coming in with those regulations. And a change in regulations doesn't mean we're out to get somebody. That's their bad timing, I guess. But if as far as putting this succinctly, as you're saying, I see it as a couple of sentences within the existing code. And if we're on a consensus of 1 minute per inch is fast enough and 5 is too slow, then we can stay with the 1, we can move it to 5, but this is the opportunity to do that, where an area of special concern is 1 in 5 or 1 in 10. And that's it. You're done. You've created that area of special concern, and you're creating the permeability question and all those other things. And adding the word permeability someplace in there is bolsters the PERC test and all these other studies that we do now. So I don't think we're looking at a total rewrite here. We're adding at simply tweaking that area of special concern, especially when we're under the gun here. If you go ahead and create those few minor changes, we can take a look at that over the next year and say, well, wait a minute, we really needed to define permeability better. But it's not hard to define. It's a definable term. So I just think that if we're going to do this under the gun like we are now, tweaking what we have rather than creating a whole nother section is the way to go. And it's never the 9th hour. These folks are on these other committees too. They can voice their opinions as it comes up, but I think we can defend it through public health.
Yeah, Tom, I meant for the 9th hour as in like we have the technical standards. They're literally out for everyone to see, and it's something different town by town when you're getting into an area like ours that have my ordinances that are more stringent. So saying if it's going to be more stringent, it would be helpful if it was stringent. So if a developer comes in here, he's not finding out last minute that he has to do certain things, meaning possibly an extended nitrogen analysis that the way the DEP does it, or an on-site permeability sample, that type of thing. So like not the 9th hour of that, but just coming in, how are you supposed to do a project if you don't know what you need to deal with going into a town, meaning septic or wells, that kind of thing.
So
Well,
it sounds like what we're trying to do, right? And I think this is a good thing, is to systematically define, like, these are the things you're gonna have to do in these areas, right? So the developers know what's coming, like, I'm gonna build in this area, I'm looking at a lot, this is what I need to do, right? And make it very clear. So one of the things that I proposed in the other group as well is, short-term and long-term. We've got a short runway here to get some changes up in front of some folks that, if we've got consensus on, great. And then there's the long-term plan, right? I don't think this conversation is over, and I don't think it should be. I think there's a lot more work that needs to get done over the long haul. And it sounds to me like we have good groups of folks together to be able to make those decisions, right? So I would definitely propose short-term, long-term plans for them, right? For people to really to continue this so that we can meet the goals of the state for housing or affordable housing or whatever they want to call it. But at the same time, protect public health and the environment, right? It can all get done.
I agree. Short term and long term. I absolutely, that's so funny that we were just talking about that the other day. Short term and long term recommendations, especially if they do ever want to do AT. That's where the
Yeah.
long term is going to come into handy.
Yep.
Go ahead, John.
Sonia, I want to remind you of when we went to MLSS. All right. So here was a whole bunch of guys stacking these systems up. They're 15 feet long length of run, and they're making TV antennas out in the backyard. And you know what those diagrams all look like. And we went to MLSS and everybody screamed, right? Oh, but we had a public health reason for that. And that came down to permeabilities, and it came down to spreading that system out so that the soils had the opportunity to renovate the sewage. It's never going to be a problem, in my opinion, to propose something that has some science behind it and is in the public health interest. So someone coming in with an application and the code changes in the middle of the application. I don't know the legal ramifications of that. But right now, someone coming in January 1st is going to have a new code every other year anyhow. So they just got to do their homework and know what they're applying for.
Which is where training comes in handy. Consistency and training. Does anyone else want to say? Rob? You went off mute. Does anyone else have anything to say? Dennis, no?
I do have something to add. This was my off-topic comment. I think that in kind of like consistent with what we were discussing earlier with like the reserve areas, like the setback regions, and I appreciate the kind of discussion around public health and environmental impact, because I think the environment is certainly a social determinant of health. So I think, even if there is an environmental argument for something, I think that can easily be tied to public health. So I don't want to kind of gridlock us from using environmental impacts as well, as long as we can tie it back to health. But then I also, Sonia, you mentioned AT, and so I do want to flag that that's like going to come sooner rather than later. So we just want to, that is something, that we're statutorily charged to do, and the governor's office has, given us some funds to do that hiring. So that's something that we're working on. It's moving slow, but it is kind of in the works. And quite frankly, that's what we were hoping this working group as a whole would focus more on, but is seemingly to take a backseat, because that's really an area where the department lacks a lot of expertise. But I know at the beginning of the conversation, we talked a little bit about naturally occurring soils and kind of building up soil. That is something that the home builders were arguing very hard for in legislative session. You say we're allowed to do it in all the other neighboring states. Why not Connecticut? What's different about Connecticut? Rhode Island has more, coastal area, all these things. And, if this group is, going to want to stay course with not allowing additional soil buildup and kind of to expand the land, that's going to have to be a really strong environmental public health argument, because that's something where we were losing during legislative session. So I do want to just flag that that's something this group probably needs to, aggressively address.
Miriam, so like that was what the 5-year legal battle was with the naturally occurring native to the site soils. And I showed you the property. Like that's why we don't want it on the shoreline. We can't.
Yeah.
However, that being said, if we get AT, that's a little like it's a different, because we need AT on the shoreline. And yes, you should be able to do a little something different if you're going to clean the effluent to a certain extent. But the other part of Connecticut is that they may have like till, for example, or something. And so I can kind of see it from both sides. I'll let Tom speak because he's definitely a soils guy and I'm not. So I'm going to let Tom speak.
My train of thought, but the naturally occurring soil thing, we haven't even brought that up as a part of our discussions right now. But if you can show from a science standpoint that you only need 1 foot of naturally occurring soil, And you can put material above that, because the whole point of this is renovation. So if you're going to create a giant sand pile, which, oh, by the way, is one of the alternative treatment systems, right? If you're going to create this giant sand pile, you better have something underneath that's going to scientifically renovate the soils. Now, enough sand will eventually do the job. We all know you can engineer just about anything, and that's why in repairs in B100A we allow certain things to happen. But in new construction, and I want to focus on new construction because we can't create new lots if the naturally occurring soils can't handle the sewage. So whatever you want to do for definition of naturally occurring soils is fine, as long as it's got some science behind it. And right now we're using that 2 feet of naturally occurring soil. Somebody looked at that. And I can't say it was me, but someone looked at that and said, that's our minimum. That's, or with a fudge factor involved, that's our minimum soil that we can have on a site in order to be considered developable. When you get into the B100As and the renovations and all those other things that are happening, you need to show code compliance. And that could be getting back to permeability and whether, oh my God, I've said that word a lot today, whether you can, renovate that sewage. So, and along those lines, I bet you guys were a lot happier when I was quiet, but I'm awake now. So here you
No,
guys.
this is all really helpful.
Go ahead, Rob.
So yeah, the naturally occurring soil piece. I mean, that's a really good question. I think, it may be worth delving in to the science on that a little bit more, just to make sure we've got our T's crossed and I's dotted here. As somebody who's been working in this for some time, and anybody I've ever spoke to, and the people I generally speak to are part of that echo chamber, right, have informed me that naturally occurring soils do a better job of attenuating and renovating contaminants from residential sewage than anything you could engineer that's, outside the AT realm. But I have, for one, have never specifically looked at the science of that. And so I wonder if maybe that's something we need to do now so that we can make sure that we're prepared for the debate in the future.
Yeah, and to that point, I think, Tom, you mentioned it as well, that the sand is a form of AT, and that's definitely something that folks are pushing for as well. And so I think, trying to figure out a way to say, like, not now, but with an appropriate AT system, I think that could potentially be an area for compromise. And then, Rob, to your point, saying that having some evidence to back up the not now. I think part of the challenge is that with this shift, folks are saying that these are things that are currently allowed. And Audrey, I would want you to back this up because I don't know if it's actually true. They're saying that there's like these AT systems with, like, the naturally occurring soil and all of that is stuff that they're currently allowed to do under the deep regulations, but that they wouldn't be allowed to do under the current DPH regulations. And I think part of that is because we don't have the engineering capacity right now to go and do those on-site inspections to, approve, whatever AT they've engineered. And so I think that is kind of a challenge with this change in jurisdiction. And so I think that, it's gonna, as of now, it's probably gonna get a little worse before it gets better for folks. But just flagging that is something we're hearing and is definitely, a programmatic challenge. And it's not necessarily like a workforce capacity. It's not like a capacity challenge. We don't actually have engineers who are specialized in that area to be able to say whether or not this is, environmentally or public healthly responsible. So that's where we're at right now. But I don't know if Audrey, if you want to just confirm that real quick.
Yeah, so under deep rules, right? It's essentially like anything that doesn't fall into the realm for DPH can come to our table, right? And we will do a site-specific evaluation. So AT is very common for individual permits. Several years ago, DEEP issued a general permit that was really just focused on conventional systems above a certain threshold. One of the suggestions I had made to the other team was maybe an AT general permit with cookie cutter type requirements, right, to them. So, a different design manual, perhaps, into the future here, where that could alleviate some of the stress on DPH, where you don't have the engineers and the capacity to do that, but gives you a faster pathway through DEEP to do it. One of the things we're doing in 2026 is kind of revamping that UIC program, recognizing some of the challenges that they have. So I would very much encourage all of y'all, we want to, do some outreach and get some feedback on those things to see if it would be helpful or worthwhile, right, for our resources. Is it, a slam dunk? No. Is it going to solve 100% of the problems? No. But it is something that is in our purview where we could help develop that type of permitting mechanism where we have those controls that are required for AT, but in a general permit type realm, right? So,
Audrey, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. Are you saying that you all DEEP can do the AT approvals until we get a hold of it ourselves?
I mean, currently that's what we're doing. Currently, we are already approving AT systems
Yeah.
over 7,500 gallons, even if it's less than 7,500 gallons. If you're AT, you're coming to
Yeah.
DEEP. Yep, and we issue individual permits for those today, but they're individual permits. And one of the things I'm suggesting is for us to develop a general permit, which is
Yeah.
resource labor intensive. But again, it might, get us 55% of the way there to alleviate some of the stress there.
Yeah. So then to kind of my earlier question, then that kind of refutes the claims then that the home builders were saying that they're not going to be able to use AT anymore, because the answer is that they can. That component is still going to go through DEEP.
They can. The challenge they run into is just that the resource challenge on our end is time consuming because we
Yeah.
don't have a cookie cutter engineering design manual out there yet. It's still very
Yeah.
site specific. So that
Okay.
is one of the things we're proposing to take a look at is let's create one, right?
Okay. Gotcha.
Miriam, can I just ask you a question? Did you mean naturally occurring native to the site soils? Because like in DEP's world, they don't have to worry about that definition. I know that that's kind of come in play because we do have AT systems down here on the shoreline. In fact, we're dealing with one that's going to be about 44,000 gallons per day. Those are like
Yeah.
huge systems, an SBR, that kind of thing. But I know from what I hear, because we've had that 5-year legal battle that we had, that was a suggestion was, well, you can go to DEP because you're not going to have to worry about the naturally occurring native to site soils. You can go to DEP and try to get an AT system.
Yeah.
Well, of course,
Yeah.
that's not practical, for every residential. And that's kind of what was said to them. That's kind of how it got resolved. But I think that it's the soils, not just the AT component that you're talking about when it comes to developer pushback, because they push back on me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the issues get like conflated in my head.
Yep.
This is not my area of expertise. I just negotiate with the
If they're
home
screaming at me,
builders.
don't worry.
The way that I think about it is AT solves the nitrogen issue
Yeah.
and soils is then a hydrology issue. And we have to keep it
Okay.
in the ground.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay, go ahead. Thank you. That's helpful.
Tom, and we got a whole bunch of people now wanting to talk. Tom, then Dennis, then Dante, then Rob. Go ahead, Tom.
Very short. Not now, but when it comes around, and the other comment was into the future. That's all stuff for later discussions when they actually have an AT thing for us. It is available, as you say, through DEP. So I personally don't want to throw any kind of reference to it into the technical standards or B103 until such time as we know what we're regulating and know what we're approving. So don't give them false hope, because what if it never happens? So that's my 2 cents on that. And naturally occurring soils will always work better than anything you engineer. But we've said that already. Okay, thank you.
Short term and long term, exactly what I'm thinking, Tom. Go ahead, Dennis.
Hey, thanks. Boy, lots of topics to cover, and I'll try and not jump around too much. All right, so naturally occurring soil. You're right. No other states require it. Here I am dealing with Vermont on an issue of they want to increase housing, so they're looking to do infill in villages. 200 of the 250 villages in Vermont do not have sewer. So what do? You go to septic. Okay, great. Okay, there's no place in the village to do it but under the parking lot. Not a big deal, right? I mean, we deal with that every day, right? Oh, we don't allow septic under parking lots, but every other state around them allows it. And here we are rolling our eyes, right? Well, why the hell wouldn't they allow it, right? It's a direct conflict with their political goals of increasing housing and affordable housing and at the septic side. So I'm dealing with that whole thing right now. So it kind of goes both ways, because I would say, look, the natural occurring soils, I think as a group, we need to be open, whether it be naturally occurring soils or reserve areas. Everything we bring up that the home builders want, we shut down. I can tell you this, if we come to our conclusions and everything's nil, 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 nothing's going to change. And then it's going to be rammed down our throats, right? It's going to go political, and we don't have the political clout, but the home builders do. They have the money, and they have the lobbyists, and they have the connections. So we ought to look best to see how we can, I don't want to say compromise, but again, public health is number one. All the other states around us don't have this naturally occurring soil thing. I'm an engineer. I could design a system with imported sand, with fines in it to slow it down, or whatever I want to do to meet the treatment limits. So I'm just thinking we need to be open to some changes. Otherwise, it's going to come in a bad way that we don't want, out of our control. So that would be my big point. Now, on the flip side, we can say this goes both ways. Connecticut only requires 18 inches of separation. I go to Massachusetts, what is it? It's 4 feet, right? And we all say, well, geez, we want science, we want science. We don't have science to prove what we have now in the code, right? Tom brought that up. So I'm just saying we need to sit back and probably be a little more open to change than we are now, and otherwise it's going to go the wrong way.
So I'm going to jump in here at a turn, but because I think this is going to be helpful. In the nitrogen group, one of the engineers put together a proposal for us to just get the ball rolling. Dee provided some responses to that, and I think a lot of the responses are really in line with what we're talking about here. And so I would like to share it with you all, if that's okay. So it's Stu Fairbank, who is well renowned in the state here. And just so you can see some of the back and forth that's occurring, but also some of the things that we're proposing. Again, similar things to what we're talking about here, and that just helped put some food on paper.
It is great, excellent, actually, Audra. Please, if that's okay, we can send it through Peter and make sure that all the members get it. Thank you. Dennis, are you still, or Dante next? Sorry. Your hand's still up, Dennis.
Yeah, I think just part of the challenge is that, in thinking about how AT would work, I think we have a prescriptive code, right? It's different. It's a whole different regulatory approach. And so that's part of the challenge ahead of us in the long term. And that's probably something that home builders may be thinking about too, is just sort of how am I going to navigate, is it going to be easier? Is it going to look more like a general permit would, for example? And those are unanswered questions at this time, but that is a consideration, is sort of how would AT really effectively with a public health focused approach fit into the way that we already regulate systems. I think that's just something that's probably in the background there, in terms of how the home builders are thinking through their jurisdiction. And
it's literally in the back of my head at every conversation.
Yeah.
Because of what we go with on the shoreline, and we have AT in our wastewater facility plan. So yes, I'm always going to put that plug in too. Thank you. Go ahead, Rob.
Just a couple of things, going back to what Marion was speaking to as it pertains to B1, actually, as it pertained to naturally occurring soils. I think I'm concerned that that's a bit of a house of cards here, and that if we go back and start doing the research on the science behind that concept, which I've gone through my entire career supporting and promoting, if the naturally occurring piece goes away, then that means that's going to put a lot of vulnerability to the reserve area too, because that was the argument we were just making, at the beginning of this meeting, that it's got to be natural occurring, and only a reserve area can maintain that. And so then there's that piece, and then what's left if we can't find the science to back up the naturally occurring soils. then it looks like we're back to hydraulic analysis and nitrogen assessments with what we're doing on undeveloped lots. And I've got my concerns with that, but my sense is that the naturally occurring soil piece is inherently has through its current state has inherently a supported non-concentrated development. It inherently compels the developer to maintain a certain amount of space when developing a piece of property. And so I'm going to be, I for one, of interest to see if what science exists in that particular point moving forward here.
Okay, good.
And I had another thought, but I can't remember what it was.
You can send us an email.
Okay.
It's almost 4 o'clock, guys. I actually can't even believe it went this long. So December 22nd, I think that you guys are going to find this very interesting because some of what we are talking about, just having these long-term recommendation, meaning having a committee similar to what we're talking about, because these things that we're talking about should be based on science and research. And if our code is or regular or technical standards is prescriptive, then we need to have, as everyone's been saying, the science to back it up. So that's where funding and positions go in. It all is tied in together. I do have to adjourn the meeting, but I just want to make sure, does anyone have any additional business? Sorry, it's kind of short cut to an end, but does anyone want to say anything in particular right now? Okay, this is a great conversation, by the way, guys. I really appreciate it, especially on the shoreline. I will see you December 22nd. And like I said, just keep your minds open and let's hear what the person has to say. And I think we'll have a lively conversation about areas of special concern, because I'm hoping to put that one on the agenda, where we will have our builders there to talk about this and the developers. And I think that's a conversation that a lot of us need to have in one Zoom call. So, all right, great, guys. Have
Thanks,
a lovely
everyone.
couple days and see you on the 20th.